The LSU Tigers falter against Ole Miss, and the New Orleans Saints, even on a loss, look a lot better than a week ago. We'll talk about that and so much more on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome everyone to the latest edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in as always. And if you haven't already, make sure you go to Spotify and you hit the follow button. Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you're subscribed. That way you do not miss a single solitary episode. And it was a pretty interesting weekend across the world of college football and pro football as well. We're going to get to it when it comes to the Louisiana teams. And as we always do, we want to start off with winners first. Obviously, we got to get to the LSU Ole Miss game, but we'll save that one because we want to kind of pump the positivity because it wasn't all down in the dumps. There was some bright, shining moments from this weekend amongst Louisiana teams. And I think the biggest one has to be the Louisiana Raging Cajuns. A late lunch changed the fortunes in double overtime against the Marshall Thundering Herd. Why do I say that? Well, you want to figuring out who is going to be the QB1 the rest of the way. I think that was the $1 million question we were all trying to figure out as we found out about the situation with Walker Howard and his torso injury that caused him to be out for the year after getting surgery. You know, Daniel Beal, he did fair enough. He didn't do anything that set the world on fire, but he looked okay. Now I think you found your QB1 and maybe your QB1 of the future. I don't know what things are going to look like going into 2026 and beyond, but if what we saw this past Saturday against Marshall is any indication, I think it's time for Lunch Winfield to be the official starter. You've got a week off. I think now is the time to kind of say, hey, this is our QB1. This is who we're going to ride and die with. I want to see what he can do on a more consistent basis, and being the QB1, maybe that first step towards this team kind of riding the ship, you know? And it's going to be a rough rest of the season because you are obviously dealing with the lack of an offensive line. But even then, they looked good. And yes, they had some big mistakes in the third quarter that nearly sunk them. You know, you even go back to the end of the first half. You left too much time on the clock, and Marshall wound up putting up 24 unanswered on you. That is not a great look. You had the big boy pick six after a very quick touchdown by the Herd. Then another interception that looked like it was basically going straight to the defender on that play. So overall, you did not have a great third quarter, and those mistakes were pretty much very close to getting you a big loss at home in front of an alleged 20K. It's not a great look for the program to see another underwhelming performance in front of a home crowd. So many people left that game in the third quarter disappointed and disheartened, and I'm sure they're like, damn it, I should have stayed. And that's, I think, the number one rule I feel like a lot of people need to follow. One of the big things that Dr. Brian Magger, the AD for the Cajuns, said at the beginning of his time with the program to today is to show up early, be loud, and stay to the end. People are listening to that last statement. Again, I understand you have a game kicking off at 7 o'clock at night on a Saturday. I get it, especially with all the TV timeouts and whatnot. You know, the game this past Saturday didn't end until damn near 11 o'clock. I get it. As a person that, you know, definitely was a little exhausted on Sunday afternoon, wound up having to go make a quick stop to the coffee shop to get me a little extra boost of energy. I can tell you, I get it. I understand I sympathize with that person that's not necessarily feeling like staying up that late at night on a Saturday. Maybe you got kids. Maybe you got stuff going on Sunday. You want to make it to Sunday church. I hear you. But when you have a game like that, you are definitely kind of sitting there on Saturday night when you get home and kind of watching the rest of it on ESPN Plus, you're sitting there like, damn it, I should have just stayed. I should have stayed there because I could say I was there for that moment. And I'm sure there's going to be people who are going to, lie and say they were there. But unless you have the old saying, pics or it didn't happen, you got to show us where you were when that final play happened. You got to show yourself celebrating. And I don't think a Grok or a Chat GPT can replicate that experience. It was an amazing moment to see that team turn it around. Lunch Winfield, he looked fantastic and gave that offense a spark I have not seen in the last couple of years. Everything was clicking for him. Every pass he threw was damn near a perfect dot. I was seeing some dimes thrown out there. It was impressive to see him do that. Then also getting it done on the ground as well. He looked pretty comfortable. He did look at moments, though, throughout his time as the QB1 where he was kind of hopping. It wasn't necessarily he was hobbling or limping, but you could definitely tell something was up. And obviously, you get concerned because this Cajuns team since 2022, since the second Dez took over, they've been dealing with the injury bug, especially at QB. And it feels like to a certain extent there is a little bit of some bad juju. And I'm wondering if Lunch Winfield is going to be okay. According to the post game, Lunch said he was just a little banged up, but it should be fine because of the fact that they've got a bye week. They've got the open date next week, so they're fine to kind of let him rest up, and then we get into, the game in mid-October, and then you can kind of start making plans, hopefully, for a bowl game. I don't necessarily think you're going to get to the Sun Belt Championship game. It'd be an amazing prospect. But I think at the end of the day, you're going to go ahead and take a 6-6 year if you can pull it off. It's going to be an uphill climb, especially with some of the programs starting to kind of ramp up in terms of how good they can actually be. It feels like the top tier of the Sun Belt West is going to be a lot tougher than recent years. The thing I will give credit to the Cajuns outside of Lunch Winfield, leading that team to a double overtime win, nothing short of outstanding. But I got to give credit to the Cajuns keeping it clean. Like, they only had 2 penalties, technically speaking, in terms of the way stats are kept. The kickoff that wound up going out of bounds, that wound up being nothing. It was not considered a penalty per se. It's a flag, but it's not a penalty like a running into the kicker. And thankfully, it was just a running into the kicker, not a roughing the kicker, because that would have been automatic first down. And that could have changed the complexion of that game. And we could be still playing that game right now with a 2-point shootout. But again, fairly clean performance. And I definitely feel like another turning point in that game was the targeting call, simply because of the fact that it was on a third down play. It was second down, if I'm not mistaken, second down, and it was going to be a 3rd and 1. They reviewed the play, and they didn't say it was for targeting. It was just more for whether or not they spotted the ball right. And then they wound up seeing, oh, hey, number 7 targeted, he's out of the game. And I think that kind of changed the complexion, because then the offense started to really come alive. And that led to the big rally where the Cajuns wound up being able to tie it up and take the lead in the final moments. But of course, Marshall wound up scoring again on that final drive with moments left in the game. Cajuns took back the lead, and then they had the wild attempt at the lateral play, only got one off before the guy got tackled, and then we wound up going to overtime. And I also got to give credit to one player in particular, that's Colin Jacob. The man was all over the map on Saturday. He was hitting 12 tackles on the weekend, just nothing short of spectacular. I think, again, this is being taped on Sunday night. We're going to find out on Monday afternoon, probably around the time this podcast drops. I would not be surprised if Lunch Winfield is your offensive player of the week. And I feel like Colin Jacob, if he got a turnover, he would have gotten absolutely mentioned as a Sun Belt Conference defensive player of the week. Colin Jacob looked good, But Lunch Winfield, obviously the big star in this one. Keeping it positive, UL Monroe for the first time since 2009. This may or may not be a recession indicator, depending on who you talk to, but UL Monroe overcame some early errors to beat Arkansas State. There was a pick six by Aiden Armenta that wound up helping the Red Wolves go up 7-0. Then they were quickly up to 14-0 in the first quarter. But the rest of the way, it was all Warhawks. They held the Red Wolves, Arkansas State, to 6 points, and they got things done. Armenta, he looked better as the game progressed. Wasn't necessarily like lighting the world on fire with a little over 130 yards passing, but he managed the game well enough. The run game was balanced. Palmer Smith impressed. He had a heck of a run, 50-something yards, 80-something yards rushing. Just really solid performance from him, and really good to see UL Monroe starting to kind of put it together. Liking what I'm seeing there. Another team I'm liking what I'm seeing has to be, without a doubt, the Tulane Green Wave. And more because it's not all falling on Jake Retzloff, a guy who has looked good. Now, it looks like they may have found somebody else, and that is one of their running backs. They got Gordon to get involved, and he got it done. I'm not sure I can actually say that legally, but we're going to go ahead and say it anyways. Shout out to the Green Wave getting it done. Retzloff found Omari Hayes a lot in that ball game. And again, I liked what I saw. I've liked what I've seen from him throughout his time with the Green Wave coming over from BYU. It wasn't he didn't set the world on fire. It wasn't all about him. But you got to give a ton of credit to Javen Gordon. 78 yards off of 15 carries and 3 touchdowns to boot. Jake Retzloff wound up also getting a touchdown on the ground. But still, a really solid performance for him. And also, you got to give a shout out to Harvey Dyson, getting a couple sacks in there as well, eating up Baylor Hayes, who had to leave the game to get evaluated. So it's a really good win for a program that needed to bounce back after a tough loss against Ole Miss. And we'll talk about them in just a little bit. But I need to talk about what's going on with the La Tech Bulldogs. At the beginning of the season, I was saying this is a program that is going to be on the hot seat, namely because Sonny Cumbie last year underwhelmed. Lo and behold, here we are in just about to flip the calendar over to October, 4-1 on the year with a 30-11 win over UTEP. And get this, you had 5 interceptions from Jakari Foster, Alonzo Jackson Jr., Sifa Leota, don't know if he's a part of the bloodline, Michael Richard, and Colby Fields. Nothing short of impressive to see from that program. To see them getting things done on the defensive side of the football. It wasn't a blowout in the scoreboard. It was kind of weird seeing an 11 points being put up for UTEP, but it's still a really nice win to help build up that program and kind of help them bounce back. Again, you had that loss against LSU a couple weeks ago where it's like, oh, hey, this team may have something. And I wonder how much that plays a role into the growth of the Bulldogs. And maybe that was a moment where it's like, hey, we can actually do this. Meanwhile, you have Southeastern Louisiana. They were able to hold on and avoid getting a tough loss to UT Rio Grande Valley, a team that's a lot better than what I expected heading into the season. I believe this is their first year as a program. And Southeastern hung on to win 45-31, big shootout game. And also, more importantly, Southeastern Louisiana was able to kind of stop them because it looked like in the fourth quarter, they were starting to rally with 14 points in the final frame. But Southeastern was able to stop them nonetheless. Very good performance for the Lions. And I'm sure they're looking forward to seeing how they do the rest of the way as we start getting into the conference. Into conference play. Kind of stammered there. Kind of make sure that stuff gets fixed. And one thing that, I think is going to be tough to fix is what's going on with LSU. They took a tough loss to the Ole Miss Rebels. I think that's the other big headline of this weekend. And there was a few takeaways I had. Number one, The pick six that got called back due to DPI, I disagree with. That killed momentum for sure. But then you had the PI right after. That just broke the camel's back very early on. And it felt like this team couldn't get it together. After the first few drives, you've got a really lucky play that led to the touchdown with Sage Ryan basically tipping the ball in the end zone, and Nick Anderson basically gets a freebie. And also you had a really great, I think you had like one really good play offensively. It was a deep ball, and that should have been 6. That deep ball should have been 6 points, but the wide receiver couldn't get into the second gear for whatever reason. You were up 7-3, and the game started to get away from you. And that high-speed offense that Ole Miss has is way too much for them. They were playing a lot of tempo, and they were wearing down that defense. It wasn't a shootout like maybe some expected, but you saw that Ole Miss's offense isn't anything to trifle with. Yes, it is a damn near D2 quarterback transfer at Ole Miss that outclassed you, but you also got to give credit to the talent that's around Trinidad Chambliss. The guy has it, and I'm intrigued to see how he grows in this role as a QB1, because I feel like Lane Kiffin's going to play the hot hand the rest of the way until that hot hand gets cold. You're on a heater, bud. Just go ahead and keep doing what you're doing. That's all you can do, right? Meanwhile, LSU's got to make some tough decisions, mainly with Garrett Nussmeier. And a lot like the Cajuns, a good thing is they're actually off this weekend. So they have some time to figure out what exactly is eating Garrett Nussmeier. And I was seeing people saying in postgame, wasn't able to kind of keep up that much with some of the postgame comments from Brian Kelly on Saturday. Was busy with Cajun stuff. But I feel like people were saying, Brian Kelly says everything's fine. He's okay. And that just screams to me, you are basically being a person peeing on my leg and telling me that it's raining. He is hurt. We know he's been hurt since fall camp. And the torso injuries are extremely difficult to determine whether or not that's affecting you, and whether or not, even if you get close to 100%, you're playing in a rough game, and one hit probably messes up your throwing motion. Your rhythm's messed up. It's jacked up. You have to fix that long term. I'm not necessarily sold on what I saw from the purple and gold on Saturday that says Garrett Nussmeier is not hurt and he's not dealing with something that is affecting him and his rhythm. I've said it, going back to Walker Howard and going back as far as Drew Brees when he was dealing with the oblique injury a while back. Those torso injuries for a quarterback are the worst because it affects a lot of stuff. It affects the way you throw. It affects the way that you play. It's a mental thing. And the Nussmeier injury, it's starting to show itself. There was one play very early on where Nussmeier got P-laid by a defensive lineman of Ole Miss after he let off a pass where his offensive lineman literally picked him up like he was a child. Like a child. And you're trying to tell me in 2025 there's nothing wrong with him? You're out of your damn mind. I feel like there is an injury that he's dealing with that we won't know the severity of until the end of the season. Just saying. And as the season progresses, you've got to have that conversation whether or not you want to just say, hey, we're going to sit you down for a bit. We're going to put MVB in, Michael Van Buren, and see how it goes. Sometimes you just got to make the right decision for your player, for his career after LSU. This is a guy that a lot of people heading into the season had highly touted as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL next season, a top 5 draft pick. I wouldn't have taken him for top 5 draft pick anyways, but a lot of people were saying it. Sports Illustrated was saying it. I was seeing Walter Football putting out their mock draft saying it. I just don't see it in him. I just don't see it with him. I never really did. He's looked good, but I don't think he's top 5 pick franchise quarterback worthy. I think he's more of a day 2, round 3, maybe. But that stock that he has in his draft capital, it is going down week by week, especially as we see that injury is playing a huge role. And the other thing is, Brian Kelly is further proving he cannot win a big game. It felt like maybe he got that monkey off the back with the Clemson game to start the year. That was a big game. But I think it's safe to say that this isn't your slightly older brother's Clemson Tigers. This isn't the Clemson Tigers with Sunshine leading the way. No, this is Clemson from about 10 years ago when Clemsoning used to be the cool thing to say. We're continuing to see that program kind of go towards the bottom. Florida, we're seeing where they are. Southeastern was Southeastern. La Tech was La Tech. You're seeing that offense underwhelm. Caden Durham obviously out, affected the run game. But you got to figure that out. That is the next thing that LSU has to figure out sooner or later. Because if you can't figure that out, you're not winning many games. I think Joe Sloan has definitely affected the offensive play for the Tigers, but I don't think it's necessarily the entire thing. Again, the biggest thing I've noticed and observed, and I'm far from a football expert, never played college football, never played pro, hell, never played high school, but I can tell when somebody's injury is showing in terms of he doesn't have as much zip on the fastball. It is eating at him. He is getting hit a good bit, and that is affecting the injury and exacerbating things from my point of view. And I kind of run short on time here, so we'll kind of run through some of the other college football games, then we'll get to the Saints. Nichols, they dropped one to Eastern Kentucky again. Tommy Wright Becky's kind of having to redesign this program, so first year, he's going to get a little bit of a pass, but it's still not a great look. McNeese got some turnovers that want to spell in their doom against Stephen F. Austin. Overall, not a great start to the season for Matt Viator. Outside of the shining moment to start the season, it looked like the prodigal son was kind of getting things done over in the Chuck, but now it's starting to look not as great. Then you had Grambling losing a tough one to Prairie View A&M. I think that's kind of just is what it is. The other loss that we need to get to is Southern getting outclassed by Jackson State. And I think there needs to be a serious conversation about Mickey Joseph and his future as the head coach of the Jags. That is not the way I think Southern wants to look in 2025, is not being able to find a win to save your life. Again, Jackson State's a good program, but they have only one win on the season. And I don't think they hired Mickey Joseph to get just one win a year. I don't think he's going to last too much longer unless he can really start to turn the ship. And now we'll wrap it up with the New Orleans Saints taking on those Buffalo Bills. And I said it on the pod on Friday that 16.5 point spread was looking way too good. Sadly, I've more or less retired from the world of sports betting, but I should have thrown down some serious shekels on the Saints covering against the Bills on Friday after I got off work. Lo and behold, they covered that spread and looked markedly better. Again, I feel like that is saying, like, you're the tallest short person. Like, it's not great to be 0-4, but you take this shining light as saying, hey, they looked good against one of the better teams in the league. In the AFC, you played the Buffalo Bills and you played them tough. There were some bad moments in there. Yes, you had special teams mess up. You had that kickoff that failed to get into the zone. That's pas-bon. Your field goal kicking got better, but still, there were some issues. I noticed very early on in the game. This is something I'm just going to stick on for a while, is the scripted plays to start the game. Obviously, every team has like 10, 12 plays they're just going to roll out for the start of the game, just to kind of test things out for the first series, first couple drives. And here we are. This team somehow had to burn a timeout during scripted plays because they had 12 men on the field. Again, I understand this is the second game. They're on the road with a brand new head coach. But that still doesn't excuse the fact that you screwed that up. That is not a great look in my mind. Like, this team has been snake bit by the, procedural penalties. And you are having to burn a timeout because you realize, oh, I've got 12 men on the field. I don't want to get flagged and lose an opportunity to try and get something going. Smart move to call for the timeout, but a boneheaded call for whoever kind of misunderstood the assignment. It was sticking around a little bit too long. That is not a great look. In my mind, I feel like a lot of people can say that, but I think this offense looked a little bit better. You had, Spencer Rattler. He looked good. He looked more comfortable in the offense now that he's able to kind of be more mobile. Now, do I think he's going to be MVP caliber in the next year? Not necessarily, but he's looking more and more serviceable, which at the end of the day, when you are the New Orleans Saints and you are trying to figure out how to move forward after Drew Brees, this is a promising sign, especially with Kellen Moore probably liking to work and operate more with an offensive dual threat quarterback in mind. We've seen what he's done with Jalen Hurts. If he can do that with Spencer Rattler, I think they are cooking with something, but I still feel like there's some things that need to be fixed. Jonas Sanker absolutely shined on the defensive side of the football. Intrigued to see how he's going to be going forward, especially as we're seeing more and more players go down with injury. Alontae Taylor, he went down, and that looked rough in the contest against the Bills. And I hate to say it because a lot of last week I was very negative on the Saints, and trust me, there's no good way of saying this team's pretty much going to have to fight their hardest for a win. But based off of what I'm seeing a quarter through the season, there's still some positivity, some optimism to have. Not in the 2025 season, but I think going forward, Kendre Miller is starting to show up. Again, Alvin Kamara is not getting any younger. You have to figure out what you're going to do with him going forward. I think Kendre Miller may be that answer. Then you have Spencer Rattler. He's getting more confident. Again, I think winning a game would absolutely change everything for him. He's the first ever Saints quarterback to go 0-10. That is an amazing statistic that I didn't realize until heading into today's game. He was the only Saints quarterback to be 0-10. Think about that. You had a lot of really crappy quarterbacks, and not a single one of them started off their career 0-10. Now, hopefully, he can kind of get that win. I don't see it happening in the next few weeks, but everything that I'm seeing shows this team has the capability to win. And at the end of the day, that's all you really need is to acknowledge, hey, we can win games. We just have to play a little bit better, because you look at those first 2 weeks of the season, they kept it competitive, kept it close, and lost in the final moments of the game. Ball bounces a certain way, you win those games. That you can take solace in. I'm not necessarily calling for moral victories to be praised on this program, but I like what I've seen from this team. At the end of the day, that's all I need to kind of sleep a little bit easier on a Sunday night going into a work week. Hopefully you've been enjoying the Louisiana Lunch Hour. We're hitting right towards the 30-minute mark, which is how much I want to spend talking to you about sports talk, because I want to get you what you want, and then you can go about your day. Make sure you go check us out on Spotify, YouTube, social media. Just search Louisiana Lunch Hour, and guess what? You can take it to the bank that we will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast.